Hey guys, my name is David Henson, and I'm going to be taking the next few moments and sharing with you on the subject of defensive listening. After listening to my speech, I really hope that you will understand the effects of defensive listening and understand how it determines what we hear, and not only that, but how we apply it. People who are deemed defensive listeners often misinterpret what the speaker is saying, or they assume that the speaker is trying to maybe pinpoint them in some way, specifically through the message that they are presenting to the audience or to that person. A good example of this would be a teenager whose parents question them about their friends and their daily activities. The parent's intention may only be to have a creative conversation, while the teenager may think the parents are probing into their personal lives. Another example could be a conversation between a husband and a wife. The wife may ask the husband why he's having to work so much overtime. The wife's intention may only be to create conversation, while the husband may assume that the wife has an offensive assumption. In an article entitled "Blaming and Defensive Listening: Two Deadly Sins of Personal Communication," psychologist Dr. Douglas Cox says this. He says, and I quote, "Defensive listening is done when, in a conversation, one is preoccupied with fear, anger, or resentment. The message being delivered by another is discredited automatically, and what ensues is an attempt to make the listener's feelings obvious to the speaker or to the others listening in. This we do via defensive listening, in which we interpret, rebut, and argue." So let's take the next few moments and discover the effects of defensive listening, understand how it determines what we hear and how we hear it, and also how we can overcome defensive listening. Here are some ways of here are some of the effects of defensive listening. Number one effect of defensive listening is that you misunderstand others by what you perceive they are saying or how they're trying to say it, rather than what they are actually saying. Another way would be, or another effect would be of defensive listening would be listening is that you feel as if the speaker is out to get you, which creates tension. For example, you could be listening to someone talk about a certain subject. You could feel like that person is trying to pinpoint you and target you, and I'll mention that in just a moment, but that sort of thing takes place. So let's take a closer look at how defensive listening determines what we hear. The first point I want to bring up is this, is that the speaker could have the best intentions, and most usually do. That is, helping you or others, but if you assume they're out to get you, so to speak, you'll never benefit from the speech. You'll never take away, you'll never reap the benefits, the positives of what the speaker is trying to say. Ronald Alder and George Rodman write in their book, Understanding Human Communication, this: defensive listeners take innocent comments as personal attacks. And that's exactly what it is. The speaker may not have a clue that you're dealing with a certain thing, or you have guilt about something, or that's just a couple examples, but they could be speaking on a subject and you think they're targeting you specifically. That's just one form of defensive listening. And so we only hear part of the information, that is, the way we want to hear it, and that becomes a problem. The message being presented could have multiple benefits for you. It really could. Your family or others, the whole room, whoever the speaker is speaking to. But defensive listening leads us to tune out the speaker sometimes, making it impossible to reap any positive benefits from the message. Again, the speaker could have the best of intentions, but if you're defensive listening, you're not gathering the benefits. You're not gaining anything from that. Arlene Mallett says in an article entitled, "Non-defensive listening saves relationships." How true is that, right? That we must remember everyone has a different filter to process things based on childhood experiences, relationships, and trauma in life. Discovering ways to overcome defensive listening is something else I'll share with you briefly. The first thing is that we have to try to remain open-minded. We really do. We can't just close ourselves off to a speaker. We can't just shut ourselves down because we don't agree with the topic, or we don't fully understand, or we have an indifference with the speaker. So we have to try to remain open-minded. Another thing is this: we have to remember that the speaker most likely has no prior knowledge of your situation, especially in a setting where you've never met the speaker. Of course they have no prior knowledge, so we can't always predetermine that they're speaking against us or directly to us, or they're trying to hurt us with what they're talking about. Another thing is this: we have to recognize that our attitude and the way we approach the message may lead to greater benefits. Right? The speaker could have something very positive for us, very, very beneficial to our situation or whatever we're dealing with. And if we don't take what they have and apply it to our lives, then we remain the same we are. Also, this is the fact that laying aside our pride is biblical, because that's what it is. It's really pride. When you're defensive listening, it's a type of pride, but to lay that aside is biblical. And not only that, but it's beneficial. Proverbs chapter 16, verse 18 says this. It said, "Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before stumbling." I think that's very key to understand. And so in conclusion, defensive listening is something that plagues each one of us from time to time if we're not careful. Each one of us has the opportunity and the ability to either allow defensive listening to have a negative effect, or we can lay aside our pride, our defensive listening, realize that the speaker isn't out to get us, and that even though the message may be difficult to hear, the benefits of receiving the message far outweigh the negativity that will plague our future. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this speech on defensive listening.